God calls you to be faithful with every dollar you make. It doesn't matter how old you are. And so whether you're 25 or 35 or 65, it's all his anyway. And so start thinking about it and and you just never know, what's going to come out of that.
I always like to ask people, what is your best piece of marriage advice?
Well, I would say I've made all the mistakes, so I'm probably the wrong guy to ask there. I think a better question would be to ask that to my wife, and she'd say all the things that I've done wrong there. I would say I'm a selfish guy, and many of us have the same problem. And the more self-focused you are, the more difficulty you're going to have in your marriage. And so literally trying to die to your own self-interest and live for your wife's is incredibly difficult, but it's incredibly important in marriage.
What about what's your best advice for raising kids?
Yeah, that's a good one, and I feel strongly about this. If I may digress a minute, at the end of the book of Joshua just is finished his time leading the Israelites, and he's got a big crowd gathered. All the Israelites are there, and he's basically saying, "I'm about ready to kick over. And so, I want to leave you guys in good stead." And that's the famous passage where he says, "Choose you this day who you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," And the Israelites say, "We choose God." And he says, "You can't choose God. You're not capable." And they said, "No, we're serious." And he's got the biggest pep rally in the history of the world. And they're all saying, "We're going to choose God. We're going to choose God. We're going to choose God." And he says, "Great, okay, let these rocks stand here as a testimony to your commitment and your dedication." And then in Judges chapter 2, it says, "That generation died, and the next generation rose that neither knew the Lord or what he had done for them." In one generation, they lost their faith. So as parents of kids, we have an obligation to instill in them faith. That is the most important job you have as a parent. So my oldest brother is a pastor, and he's counseled a lot of families. And he said there's no easy button on how to raise Christian kids, but if there is one, it would look a lot like daily Bible reading, either at the dinner table or at bedtime or whenever it's convenient. But So as far as raising children, I would say passing on that legacy of faith has to be, top of the list. And another more practical thing, I love the quote. I don't know where it came from, but we make it too hard on our kids by making it too easy on our kids. You got to let kids fail, and you got to let kids learn from disappointment and things like that. You can't just hover over them and fix all their hurts. You got to let them deal with it. And so that's a practical one that comes to mind as well.
Tim, do you share stories with the kids and grandkids of where you see God at work now through the sacrificial giving that you and Linda are doing, and through the work you're doing and providing for poor families and generational poverty?
I would say the honest answer to that is no. And I can and will do a better job of that. My grandkids are still quite young. The oldest is 7. And so I haven't had much opportunity to talk about that. Even my kids, I would say I've got 4 grown kids. I think all 4 of our kids, know some of the work we're doing, but I don't think they know to the degree that I would like them to. All of them know every one of our our grown kids knows, that I love this quote. I have it in front of me from Abraham Kuyper. I'm a Dutch guy, and Abraham Kuyper was a Dutch theologian who actually also was the prime minister of the country. And he says that there is not a square, it's a very famous quote, there is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. He owns everything. And all the income that you have, all the bank accounts that you have, all the talent and time and treasure that you have is really his. He gave it to you. And so if you have that perspective, I don't know how you could not live a life of generosity and a life of service to others. And so, again, I wish I would have had, that worldview, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But I'm glad the good Lord knocked me on the head enough to give it to me now.
I think taking
Tim, what?
the grand, sorry, Micah, just one little thought on taking the grandbabies to see the moms moving forward and the little kids in the Tuck Opportunity Center, and even for sons and daughters-in-laws to hear this little clip that we're doing today, Tim. I just encourage you to lean into that, because back in Joshua as well, where they were asked to move these rocks out of the river and pile them up, right, as an artifact for the next generation, because it's irrefutable evidence of God at work. And I remember Bob Buford, when he asked me to create a book of days to capture where I see God at work every single day in someone else's life. I've done it for 13 years now. He said, remember, Lloyd, it's not a book of look at Lloyd go. It's a book of look at God go. And he said, you could take a black marker and cross your name off at every single page, wouldn't change anything. And that's just such a wonderful, freeing thing, right? To celebrate with our kids and say, hey, guess what? You take grandpa's name out of this, but you got to confront the facts that this is what God did.
Well, and I thank you for saying that, because even conversations like this feel awkward to me, because the last thing I want to do is some kind of self-promotion kind of deal. And Lloyd, you more than anybody has said, hey, this is God at work and he's using you. He could choose to use a rock, but he, for some reason, chose to use Tim. And so to the extent others benefit from hearing some of these things, then great. So I hear your message and receive it well, and we'll implement it. I do need to do a better job and can do a better job of that, telling the stories of God's faithfulness. I'm encouraged to do that. Thanks.
Tim, what have been some of the most influential books for you outside the Bible?
That's a great question. I read a lot. There's been a lot of them. A couple. I'll depend on the Spirit to raise a couple in my mind right this second. But The Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a really, really powerful one for me. Not an easy read, but a really important one. The Hole in Our Gospel is one I read a number of years ago, and that was written by a guy that was a business guy that ended up leading World Vision, and that was a great book. Toxic Charity has already been mentioned, but that was pretty powerful. I like pretty much anything by an author called N.T. Wright. Wright. He's a British theologian, and I read a lot of Chuck Colson's books, Tim Keller's books. Just finished Generous Justice, which is another just a great read. So that's a list of them. I can give you some novels too, but I don't think that's what you're looking for.
Tim, this 2 months ago, Linda and I were over visiting our daughter and son-in-law. with Crew in Berlin. You know Carrie well, and we went to visit Bonhoeffer's home there, and to sit in his study with his little bunk bed there and his books all around, and to stand on the front porch where they came and took him away to a concentration camp where he lost his life. It was just a solemn moment. And having read The Cost of Discipleship, and then sat there where he wrote that stuff, and stood there on the front steps where they came and took him away. I got back on a comfortable plane to fly back home thinking, I have no idea the cost of discipleship.
There is a cost. There is a cost. That was a life-changing book. I would also add, and you said other than the Bible, but Isaiah 58 was, I've read Isaiah, quite a number of times. And one time, a number of years ago, I read Isaiah 58, and it talks about what does true religion look like. And that's one of those Bible verses that, talks about if you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then, here's what will happen to you. And that's what religion is. It's not just fasting and doing these rituals. It's walking the talk. And I was really convicted, through some of that.
Tim, I know we're coming up on the end here. I always like to ask people, if you had to go back and give advice to 30-year-old Tim, what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, I've been asked that question a number of times, and I can't say I've got a really good answer for it. I think a couple of things. You brought up marriage, and this is where I'll say, do as I say, not as I did. But a lot of guys I talk to are business guys, and they understand compound interest, and you make an investment when you're 20 and let it grow till you're 60, and it's amazing how that investment multiplies. Well, loving your wife works the same way. If you really love and serve your wife well in your 20s and 30s and 40s, you build that foundation of relationship that grows into your 50s and 60s and beyond, in ways that you really can't perceive when you're 30 and faced with all the busyness and challenges of life. And you have to fight hard, the tug of the world that really wants to pull you apart and do different things. I remember a couple, I was in a small group when we were newly married in our 20s, and I was always a get stuff done guy, and my wife's pretty good at that. And so on Saturday we'd have all these errands to do, and she'd do half of them, I do half of them, and we'd get so much done. And there was this couple in this group who, we said, what do you guys like to do? Well, we do all our errands together, and we don't separate on Saturday. And I'm thinking, what a sap. He's only getting half as much done as I'm getting done. And he was right. It's not about getting more stuff done. That was an interesting example that stuck with me now that was probably almost 35 years ago, 40 years ago, I heard that. That's a very practical way to say, hey, don't just think about getting more stuff done. Think about investing in your relationship and enjoying the company and walking life together. So that'd be one thing. I think you really have to be ruthless about fighting hard for time with your wife. And again, that's the caveat: do as I say, not as I did back then. And then I would also say, don't wait till you're older to start, thinking about stewardship. God calls you to be faithful with every dollar you make. It doesn't matter how old you are. And so whether you're 25 or 35 or 65, it's all his anyway. And so start thinking about it and and you just never know, what's going to come out of that. You start making some investments in some nonprofits, and you may get pulled into their work, and it may change a trajectory in your life in a way that you can't even fully appreciate. So there are a lot of young people that think, I got to save more now because I got all these expenses and everything else. But that's the time, I think, to be really opening your checkbook before Almighty God, saying, this is all yours. How do you want me to steward, these resources that you've entrusted to me?
That was awesome. Well, Tim, thank you so much for doing this today. Thanks for your investment in time and us and people to listen to this. And thanks for the example you set for me personally over the years.
Yeah, thanks for all you're doing for so many families, Tim, in Charlotte. And talking about compounding return, like you mentioned, investing in your spouse, you're going to see compounding return in years and years to come. When you and I was going to say gray haired, I'm already gray haired. When you and I are older and we wander around West Charlotte someday, there'll be generations of people who came into that school, learned to read, came out the other end with a great education, and are living great lives, building great families, right? So thanks for everything you're doing.
All right, thanks. I hope you're right. And great to see you guys. Thanks it's been a privilege to me to talk to you guys today.
Good to see you, brother.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the 100X podcast. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast service. We would greatly appreciate it if you could rate the show and leave us a review. This podcast is sponsored by Anchor Investments, whose mission is to build America's most generous real estate company. To learn more, please visit anchorinv.com.